Bueno, también agradezco la invitación por las dos fundaciones. Voy a hacer mi intervención en el inglés. So, the Irish situation has already been mentioned. Ireland, of course, does have a state. It just doesn't cover Northern Ireland, which is under the jurisdiction of the UK. But as Nikos mentioned, it does have a very particular and specific situation that makes it quite different to the Basque Country, to Catalonia, to Scotland, and that there is a right within the Good Friday Agreement, the peace agreement, to a referendum when certain criteria are met to Irish unification, which would also place the whole of Ireland, the borders would not be disputed, it would be the island, the whole of Ireland back within the European Union context. The Good Friday Agreement also creates other particular contexts. So there are some organs of the state or of both states that operate on a cross-border level in areas such as health, tourism, minority language rights. As was also mentioned earlier, there is a context whereby everyone or almost everyone who is born in the territory of Northern Ireland is entitled to be an Irish citizen and hence an EU citizen, even after Brexit, although losing a lot of EU rights that aren't based on citizenship but on residency within a member state or cooperation of social security systems as a result of that. But the citizenship was always the case. The Good Friday Agreement meant that the British government recognised that right, but that right was there anyway. Another context, of course, as a consequence of the historical colonial situation and policies that were pursued during that era and well beyond, is that Northern Ireland is a very divided society. There is an ethnic divide between the Irish, mostly Catholic, between the British, mostly Protestant populations. And from the establishment of Northern Ireland in 1921 on, as many will know, there was a high level of discrimination against the Irish Catholic population, mostly de facto, but in some cases de jure, in the sense of some of that would have been linked to citizenship, some of it would have been linked to residency. So, for example, separate to the broader UK immigration system, the north of Ireland had its own system of work permits, the purpose of which was to impede and prevent Irish citizens in the south of Ireland from working within the north. So this brings us to the question I've been asked to address, which is, well, what has been the impact of European law or of European policies in that context? And the first impact is that when both the Irish state and the British state joined the European Union, or the European Economic Community as it was in the 1970s, that had significant impacts at that point. So, for example, this work permit system to stop people from the south working in north had to go. It wasn't compatible with the evolving free movement laws, so that barrier was dismantled. And also, in the way that EU free movement laws developed, it led us to a situation whereby there was a legal underpinning where there could no longer be de jure distinctions between the rights of British citizens and Irish citizens in the north. There had to be equality of treatment. And there was a realization after the referendum, slow realization, that the legal underpinning for equality of treatment between British and Irish citizens that had resolved many of the discrimination issues was really only grounded in EU law. And Brexit had created, at that sense, a very large gap in the legal framework that has only been filled by some of the retention of EU rights in the withdrawal agreement and a new, rather informal agreement between the British and Irish time of cost, and that was one of the big fears with Brexit, that it would lead to a return of the border, a return of. Have their own arrangement, a much looser arrangement called the Common Travel Area, the CTA. And that arrangement involves officially no passport controls at all on the borders or between the island of Britain and the island of Ireland. In practice, quite often outside of the law, that's not what happens. We see selective, racist passport controls where officials there are no British border officials on the border. That would be politically unthinkable. But Irish police on the southern side of the border will single out people who they think are not British or Irish citizens on the basis of blatant racial profiling, and expect some people to carry passports and not others on the basis of ethnicity, something reminiscent of colonial pass laws. That's a serious problem. But equally, there's a de jure problem. There are many people who live in a context where everyone else can live fluid cross-border lives, but they can't. And that's the visa nationals. So people who hold citizenship of countries who require UK or Irish visas essentially face this hard border that's invisible to others, and nothing within the framework has yet been able to dismantle that. Now with Brexit and everything, it's a matter for both states, but certainly nothing within the EU framework previously solved that. So there's a few of the issues from our own experience of the impact of both EU policies and some of the broader contexts and the Irish situation.
I have a question regarding these policies. As you were explaining them, what are the effects of the policies on the cross-border communities? Would you say they help building the sense of unity, or they rather polarize the communities itself?
Which particular policies?
The European policies, the cross-border policies.
I mean, what we've that I suppose those cross-border policies haven't really had the biggest impact for us. I mean, cross-border funding is always welcomed by everyone. It's money, but the big impact really has been the removal of layers of the border because of that European context, which in the Brexit context that's had a far bigger impact. It is that has been with no physical barriers on the border. There's no rivers, big mountain ranges, things like that. It was really the customs, political, and commerce barriers that, as well as obviously the militarization, that impeded fluid cross-border lives. Once that context was removed, fluid cross-border lives have continued. Now, the Brexit deal and the border between Britain and Ireland for goods is limited. So, for example, it doesn't cover services, and if you have a British government that wants to lower, which the current one probably won't, but a future one maybe, wants to significantly lower quality and standards, or the sort of race to the bottom thing, then you may find a situation where it's difficult for different professions to operate on both sides of the border because of regulatory differences. So it's really that harmonization that's facilitated cross-border life, and it wasn't something that was designed around peace. It was just an effect of the economic model. The equality of treatment provisions were also very important because that prevented distinctions in terms of employment requirements.